Alright, I'm really going to open up a whole bunch of new levels on the leading edge. This has to do with Abraham Hicks' idea of the vortex. And what I want to do is I want to open mine up through a series of YouTube videos, a playlist about my vortex and the idea of what I can do with the idea of what a vortex is, and hopefully this will invent a whole new communication style right here on this day. I am heavily Bashar influenced and heavily Abraham Hicks influenced. Um, this becomes a whole story of having the need for concept of Abraham Hicks and Bashar, and what did they talk about? The idea of the law of attraction. So, to all the people who have had need for concept for Abraham Hicks, and the need to at least have some relationship with the vortex, with the point of gravity, and listening to the Abraham Hicks videos and hearing people in the crowd and how Abraham reacts as the channel through Esther to say, you have such powerful asking. You're on the very leading edge of the universe. And so I have put through my mind and through my intellect a lot about the idea of what the vortex is. And I am going to really relate this in a big way by telling some stories, a satsang, if you will. So Abraham Hicks and Bashar, the idea of the channeling, relating to finding that on YouTube after searching videos like Kabbalah and Hebrew letters. I just stumbled upon it, and I began to understand points of attraction and the law of attraction so much more, and understand myself as a creator. So now, when I hear anything that they say, I really can pick up the resonances to feel that I am on the leading edge of life. So, how do we open up a vortex? You give the idea of my grandma, and a person who had a very powerful vortex of her own, went to church all the time, dedicated her life to the idea of God and Jesus, and she was an Aries, and she would pioneer, and she would boss people, and she would roll the roost. Then, in the asking of Rachel through Grandma and her family, and through the series of relationships, birthed the idea of me, Andrew, a young Scorpio with a powerful vortex going to be assembled in this life experience of his own, to which this vortex of Rachel is going to be a powerful platform, a powerful paradox, a powerful, like a Rolling Stone Bob Dylan, to making Andrew what I will call the most powerful vortex in all the world. But I'm getting ahead of myself. So I had listened to a lot of things she would say, and a lot of things that I would know. She would have belief and she would have faith, but I would have a knowing. And this is how the fairy tale of life plays out between two characters. Rachel, Grandma, had lost a daughter, hypothesis, in her life earlier. This was a daughter that came from ill perception of the birthing process. The promised child was coming, but there was a lot of points of attraction that wouldn't make that okay during that Malada, that place, and that time. And she said she always had the idea of one day her daughter would die young. And when she was 18 years old, my grandma's daughter was hit by a car. And so everything from that day in the 1970s, every newspaper went into her basement. Everything became an attachment. Everything became an emotional holding on to. And the idea in the Bible that you can't take it with you. And she really wanted to. The hypothesis of the loss of a daughter really fueled her repression in such a great way, a grave way, that the cluttered house would be a catalyst in what would eventually be her death at a pivotal hypothesis moment in my own life. And so I loved my grandma very much. This is how relationships work, but I didn't think she was very intelligent. I thought she ate from a spoon, her own brainwash. I understand the Bible. I understand Jesus. I understand God. I understand a lot from a place of knowing, whereas she would go by faith. Now, faith is good to have as a building block in life and story structure, but it is not it's a weak point in when you're trying to find the ocean, trying to find the eternal stream that Abraham Hicks begins to talk about as a point of attraction. She had no concept of the stream. So in the zodiac, this would be Pisces. Pisces at first starts out as repression, which then leads to the idea of meditation, and then the process of dissolve and falling asleep and dreaming. What she didn't know, and what a lot of people don't know, is that they don't see the paradox as a sine wave. Something happens, and then they tenaciously cling to the bottom wavelength, not knowing that it is an emotional parallel reality that is a stepping off place. And in the creative universe, when you talk about hell and you believe in hell and you believe in God's punishment, then those kind of effects become the software that you're using for your life. And they're not very powerful software. So even amidst my knowing, what I've always understood and always knew in the back of my mind, I once asked the little voice in my head, to which when Jesus is about to be crucified, he says, "But I will leave you a Holy Spirit." So this was my relationship to the talking to the Holy Spirit, which then transcends in the many voices through channels like Bashar and Abraham. I asked, after being pulled to a play about people being drugged to either heaven or hell depending on their belief system, and it would be a powerful enough disturbance that she drugged us there. I was young, I didn't really want to go. That caused me to have bad dreams, caused a point of attraction of division within me, to which I asked the little voice, "What about religion?" To which the little voice said, "What about it?" And I said, "Is it good?" And then the little voice gave me something like, "Well, that's sort of for you to find out." And so there you have the archetype in astrology, my moon sign of Sagittarius, the archer, who shoots his bow and then lives the life experiences to come up with a higher understanding. So I would experience the points of attraction of feeling the repression as life itself. Abilify commercials. Living in an Abilify commercial as the fairy tale experience. But what I've been able to do is streamline a lot of understandings in a way that would help people come to an understanding about a whole lot of things that is in the divide between faith and knowing. And this is the stimulus of what the Vortex has brought to contribute to the world. So this is the initiation of my Vortex. And I'll explain it through the Bible characters of Moses and Jesus, the two that were the laws of the Testaments. For the 2,000 years of Moses, it was the Ten Commandments pulled down off Mount Sinai. For Jesus, it was the law of grace at the advent of "it is finished." Now, the commandments of Moses had to do with being jealous. Yahweh introduces himself by saying, my name is jealous. You shall not steal. You shall not covet. You shall not kill. You shall not coerce. You shall not take. You shall not lie. And all these commandments dealt around the idea of what in our life becomes the top points of novelty in conversation that represents a lot of religious confusion over subjects that kids coming in with their inborn sexuality, with the idea of sex, with the idea of masturbation, with the idea of public nudity, with the idea of conception and personhood, and what is marriage, and what is that dark, evil side of divorce on the other side. So there's how many people, what age the person is, and anything. Women are 3/4 of a person. They were meant to be kept under a tarp. They were meant to wear a hairnet in certain cultures through these understanding of what are now archaic beliefs in the evolution of the law of attraction within us. So then comes Jesus, now the new prophet who the Apostle John says is about to bring in a new age, a man who came before me is greater than me. He's now after me, but he's greater than me, and he came before me. And so they ask this new teacher, Jesus, they say, what about divorce? You're all peace and love and hippie and all these wonderful means of understanding. What do we do about divorce? And Jesus said, when you talk of divorce with your understanding that come from Moses, there is just the idea of the piece of paper. And really, what it is a piece of paper that you wrote things on. When you become jealous, you are already divorced. So as we come in powerful Vortex, I relate this to songs that I've learned growing up. Disintegration by The Cure. Now that I know that I'm breaking to pieces, I'll pull out my heart and I'll feed it to anyone. Crying for sympathy, crocodiles cry for the love of the crowd, and 3 cheers from everyone. How the end always is, how we know the end always will be. The process of disintegration and falling apart and going down into fear and depression, where that powerful paradox is. And the idea of Billy Joe Armstrong, Green Day. I walk the boulevard of broken dreams. And why is the dream broken? The dream's broken because it's divided. The division is the division is E equals mc squared, the splitting in half. So at any time, you're either one or you're two. When you're yourself, you are that singular, you are source energy within you. I use this Abraham Hicks language because it's so very powerful, and it's very good to communicate these leading edge messages. And you are one, and you are whole, and you are integrated with the gravitation of just everything moving at its pace and in its sync. But when you meet another person, then you divide. You become that person. As John said in the Bible, I am not the light, but I testify of the light. The other person. So we are in relationships, and we are either one or we are two. So Jesus says in his parable about the 99 sheep, when one walks away, he goes after the one to bring it back to the whole, which then becomes source energy, which becomes the expansion of the universe as one goes off and begins to find play. So the avenue, I will call it the gateway drug, that was a point of attraction of my asking, was when I moved in with my grandma after having no other place to go. Really, it just seemed like a syncing up. This was her last year of her life. It might have even been 1 year to the day since I moved in. I had bought a bunch of books from the library. Hypothesis, I lost my iPod that day. And one of the books, when it was in the library, it really called out to me. And it was a book on astrology. And astrology was awakening because it spoke as people in terms of archetype. So in relationships, I could relate to Romeo and Juliet as anything. So astrology let me see Jupiter's the grandpa, Mars is the teenager, the sun is the leader, the person in control, the president, the executive. And all this began to make sense to me in a way the nationalistic evolution of the English language could not touch. And so the Vortex then opened up through that to this idea of this system that I'm now able to codify and come up with. So I see myself as an eternal being. I am whole, it is now, and I am divided as a fractal person on the earth. And my points of attraction, my questions, the way I vibrate energy, allows me to use my energy to really do anything I want with it, to be the most creative person in the world, if that were what I wanted to do. So I've had the meme within me that there's 7 billion people in the world. And let's think of them as fractal patterns, that when they're separate, they are whole. They have the power of the universe. You ever have temper tantrums? You know, has it not been said, you are gods? Here I am working minimum wage, and I am the most powerful person in the world, but can I make that vicarious through you? Where we divide into two, and we break, and we see division, and we see the sine wave, and we see wavelengths, and we see the idea of what a paradox is. And there is Abraham Hicks' idea of contrast. There is Moses' 10 Commandments of what thou shalt not do, but everybody does transgress the law. Everybody does break. Everybody is both a lover and a fighter. The best of them are. So I thought in these, speaking through the translucent veil of being eternal to all the people as fractals, through the idea of what our singularity in connection is, and our ability to use and circumnavigate the universe. I and my Father are one. The Word was made flesh. the Word was with God, the Word was God. The ability of the reflection being what the consciousness inside is all about. So this is how I've been in relationship and resonance with the archetype of John Lennon, and through the ideas that were on the backdrop. So picture life as not just offense and not just defense and not just the wave of the playing field, but the sine wave itself. And when you begin to see that as integrating, you then can understand what the backdrop is, that each person can tap into the power of being God, but then they have to divide it. I call it the concept translucence, of being able to see through my person the ability of what the agenda is on the other side, the ability of people wanting to open up vortexes, being the creative force. I call it the spider totem, the ability to spin and weave matrices. So now I begin to look at the 7 billion people in the world as powerful vortexes, as powerful matrices, and now we can invent the very scale, the global scale, from the other side, from what it means, what scale of inferiority that we're measuring ourselves to. I measured myself on the scale of inferiority, and then I became the scale. And so I have the largest game of the universe within me. It is a global game. Now, this developed through fairy tale, through my videos on YouTube that are under the playlist Fairy Tale Element Series. And it was on the break of the 20th element that I began to find resonance with exactly what I want to do in life. As I have invented the scale in vibration, I am on top. I am the leader of the leading edge right now. But it's the idea of King of the Hill, and so or capture the flag. And so I can begin to look at vortexes on a global level and what the vortexes have asked as a creative agenda to what they can do in the world. Now, I have the scale as one of 7 billion people in the world. As the game becomes vicarious, the idea of what the scale is, of what you can do with the scale, is going to really begin to take off. So these are the points of attraction for my vortex, and just an introductory, about 24-minute video of where I'm going to go in this series.